Change is possible. This podcast will show you how. Welcome to episode 10 of Change is Possible. This podcast is going to be a solo episode where I talk about moments and insights from many of my amazing guests over the last couple of months. Before we kick this off, I just wanted to give you a shout. If you want to subscribe to the podcast on the platform where you do it, it's a great way to get the podcast so you don't miss any future podcasts coming up. So give a subscribe on whatever platform you're on. So the first topic that I want to talk about is something that came up in several episodes. Jack Kavanagh specifically, Georgie Crawford mentioned it as well. And it's something that is very close to my heart as well. And it's this idea of finding the other self. I'd never heard of this concept before I talked to Jack Kavanagh. But the hidden self, it's the hidden part of us that shows up when we are pushed to our limits. And we all have this hidden self. But it's only when adversity and challenges arise that this other element of us comes out and nearly fights for us. And it was really interesting. Like Georgie said that cancer gave her more than it took. She wouldn't take it back. It gave her so many lessons in life. I'm the same. I lost 15 years of my life through addiction, but I wouldn't take that experience back because it gave me so much. I found a part of me that I didn't know was there, that other self. But it was Jack Kavanagh who was paralyzed at 20 years of age. And when Jack told me that he wouldn't change the accident that happened to him because of how much he gained, that absolutely blew me away. And he just found a part of himself that was more empathetic, that was stronger, more resilient, but I think fundamentally more aware. When you find this element of yourself that you didn't know was there, a greater sense of awareness grows on the back of that. And I think that's what I have today. It's an ability to deal with difficult emotions, difficult challenges of life. And that's what Georgie and Jack talk about as well. This other self that came as a result of being pushed to the limits, but now they can call on that part of themselves when future challenges arise. And it's a really, really powerful way to navigate life. But it really tied into a couple of concepts that are really important to myself as well. And this idea, and we chatted about this with Jack, there's a great book by Michael Easter called The Comfort Crisis. And it talks about we're living in an environment full of comforts. Like for many people, they don't even have to move anymore. You can drive your car, you can get a scooter, you can go up escalators. So we don't even need to go to the shops anymore. How many people at Christmas now are just going online shopping? They're not moving. They're not doing anything. Like we have heated steering wheels in our cars. There are so many comforts, and that's not to mention the phone. We're not sitting with our own emotions. We're not sitting with ourselves anymore. Hint of boredom, hint of disconnection or social isolation. We're picking up our phone. We're looking for that quick dopamine hit that gives us that sense of feeling a little bit better in ourselves instead of sitting with discomfort. And this is a real challenge in today's modern world. And I think relating to that as well is this idea of beyond resilience. I do several programs, corporate programs. I do this in school as well. Like I don't particularly like the word resilience because it's like do more, be gritty, be determined. Let's do more. And you look at some companies and they probably just want people to be their staff to be resilient so they can get more stuff done. So I like to think of this idea of beyond resilience, and it's using the challenges of life as the fuel to learn and grow. And I suppose thinking about it now, what Jack says, I found this part of me through the other self. I struggled massively with anxiety and panic attacks. That was my kryptonite. But this other self I found, I used those challenges as the fuel to learn and grow. And now I navigate anxiety with ease. It's become my friend. It's become my teacher that has taught me to lean into challenges, to lean in to find that part of me, that other self that I didn't know I had. So how can this relate to people, to yourself, if you're listening to this and you want to find that other self? I think the first thing to realize is that we all have a part of us, that other self, that can be strong in the face of multiple challenges of life. So know that you have it. And I'm not going to tell people to jump out and put themselves in discomfort to see if that other self exists, but just know that you have it. That is really, really important. But maybe you can step outside of your comfort zone. Like, I think this idea of imposter syndrome, we think that's a bad thing. Oh, I don't want to feel like an imposter. If you feel like an imposter, that means you're out on the edges. You're leaning into discomfort and you might have a chance of finding that other self. But it's only by leaning on the edges that you face that. For some people, they're terrified of rejection. But put yourself out there into the world. Give yourself a chance of getting rejected and see what happens as a result of that. Rejection isn't necessarily a bad thing. Imposter syndrome isn't necessarily a bad thing. I remember it was Amy Huberman. I remember interviewing her one time and she said, I wasn't going to ask her for the interview. And she says, sir, if you don't ask, the answer is already no. So I was like, oh, so I was rejected before I asked. I was pre-rejected until I asked. So that's this idea. We're not rejected. Give yourself a fighting chance. Lean into imposter syndrome. Lean into discomfort. If there's personal challenges and emotional challenges for you, dip in, tip off that. You don't have to spend too much time there, especially if it's a trauma, but dip in, see what's there, get a taste for that, see if the other self is there, because it does exist for everyone. You just have to give it an opportunity to show itself. Social media was another topic that came up several times throughout the podcast. And the reality is that, like, people don't want to be spending time on social media, on TikTok and Instagram. They might think they want it, but that's not what we want. We want connection, deep connection in life. And when I was doing my own documentary with RTE last year, I remember I went back to my school and we were chatting with kids with phone use and social media use. And one of the young kids, he was about 15, said, I wish TikTok was never invented. And that just spoke so loudly for me. People just don't want the fear of missing out. They don't want to miss out and they feel they need to be on these devices. So I think it's really important that we don't really want to be on social media, but that's why it's such a big topic today, because it pulls people in. And we had Professor Anna Lemke on the podcast as well, and she has a great name for that. She calls social media the modern day hypodermic needle. And she really spoke about how young people today, adults for that matter, but young people specifically, their brains have not developed and they are not equipped to handle social media. And I think for anyone listening to the podcast and thinking about kids, when to give them a phone, Anna says the minimum time to give kids phones is 13 years of age. It's really, really challenging because we have a little one at home as well. She's nearly 12. She's looking for a phone. Our friends have phones. And it's really difficult to know what to do. But I think as parents, if you're challenged with this problem, I think modeling that behavior is absolutely key. And the genie is out of the bottle with phones. Like young people are going to have phones. Teenagers especially are going to have phones. So I think what we can do is we can model that behavior and give them healthy ways to navigate that phone use. And I think that's really, really important. But leaning into the challenges that adults have with phones, like we often talk about the challenges kids have and we're worried about our kids, but adults have a very problematic relationship with phones, myself included. I don't doom scroll per se, but I find myself overly looking at my emails and other elements of my phone. I'm always checking the metrics for exercise and stuff like that. And it's not damaging per se, but even that, it's an unhealthy relationship. But when I had Niall Brezzi on the podcast, he said something that really resonated with me and many listeners as well. And he says, the currency of social media is division. And when he went into this in depth, and I've since sort of looked into this, and what it means is that conflict, outrage, and polarization are what generates the most attention on social media. And attention is what platforms monetize. They get your attention and that's how they finance it. The more attention they have from you, the more money they get. And when we think of the currency of social media is division, it's this outrage, it's this emotional triggers and polarization, like literally dividing people. It's just like politics, the right and the left. What social media does, it pits people in terms of their opinions and puts people against each other. And it captures the attention through these emotionally evocative reels. And people are probably jumping into this. Content creators are probably jumping into this, and they're probably doing it and they don't even know why they do this, because the algorithms, they amplify polarizing content, emotionally driven content. Our people then are rewarded by picking sides. So if you have a strong take, you get more reach. If you have more outrage and more emotionally evocative content, you will get more followers as a result. And then villains and tribes, you start to create a stronger identity around that as well. So it's really important to recognize, as somebody that consumes social media, what are you leaning into? Are you leaning into outrage? Are you leaning into emotionally evocative material and content, because the algorithms are going to push them towards you as well? And then if you're starting to develop, let's say, narratives and belief systems around certain things, it's pitting you against other people with different beliefs. Like, it's okay to have different beliefs, but I think what social media it's doing, it's pitting people in one camp against the other camp. Us, them, this polarization, in group, out group. And as we've seen in the history of humankind, this in group, out group, this polarization can have massive problems with generations gone by. And that's what's happening with social media today as well. The reality is that social media can be very useful. And that's why it's so powerful. But it can also be very toxic. And I'm going to read this line out. I'm going to read it from here because I'll make a mess of it if I don't. But social media turns division into profit by rewarding content that separates people, because separation fuels engagement and engagement fuels revenue. We really have to keep that in mind. Addiction is a topic that came up several times on the podcast. No doubt we had Brian McDermott, former Premier League manager who became an alcoholic and is in an incredible recovery period right now. We had Professor Anna Lemke, who is one of the foremost, if not the foremost expert in the world when it comes to addiction. But to understand addiction, I think the definition of addiction is really key, because people throw out this idea, oh, you're addicted to this, you're addicted to that. When addiction is really the continued use of a substance or a behavior despite harm to self or others. So if somebody has what looks like addictive tendencies, but it's not causing any problems, that's sort of okay for this point in time. It could become an addiction. So you've got to be careful with that as well. But I think a really important element of addiction as well, the nature of addiction for me, is avoidance and escape. If you're using a behavior or substance to escape or avoid, that is really an important piece of information for any individual. And it's why I think people get lost in their phones, get lost in social media. They feel disconnected, they jump on their phone. They feel bored, they jump on the phone. And a real powerful principle in psychology is that behavior that's rewarded is repeated. So if you're removing something that's bad, that's a reward, and that behavior will be repeated, and that can become an addiction over time. But I think something else that's really important, it was a real key topic that I spoke to Brian McDermott about, is that addiction isn't really the problem per se. It's the solution to an initial problem. Now, it's not the long-term solution, but in the moment, if you're drinking alcohol to escape stress and emotional pain, in that moment, it's a solution. Now, it's going to cause lots of problems over time, but I think it's really important to recognize that. And in terms of Anna Lemke, I really want to lean into Anna's unbelievable experience, knowledge, and expertise in this area. And there's a line that Anna says that I absolutely love. The relentless pursuit of pleasure always leads to pain. And Anna wrote the incredible book, Dopamine Nation, New York Times bestselling book. And she really delves into the neuroscience of addiction and dopamine and how dopamine hijacks our brain. And it's this relentless pursuit of pleasure that is really challenging. And I think the challenge that many of us face today, that there are so many pleasures around, whether it's food, like you can't get away from sugary food these days. Alcohol is everywhere. Social media and phones are everywhere. There are so many opportunities to lean into pleasure, to get that quick fix, that quick hit. And that is a really big challenge for many people today. And what happens at a neurobiological level is that dopamine, the reward system of the brain, is hijacked by these pleasures. And what happens as a result of this, and it's really important to recognize this, and Anna has sort of come up with this idea, the research has been there, but it's this idea of the pleasure pain balance. And in our brains, when the reward pathway is hijacked, or when you receive pleasure in some way, you get a spike of dopamine. Now, what that dopamine does, once it spikes, it comes back down, but it doesn't come back down to baseline. It drops under baseline, and then you experience what we'll call pain, discomfort. So, what our brains want and what we want as humans, we want to feel good again, but we're in pain. So, we're going to look for something outside of ourselves, whether it's a drug, alcohol, food, behavior, social media, to get back up to baseline or go chasing that pleasure again. And it's this pleasure pain balance where it's like you're on a seesaw all of the time that can become really, really problematic. Now, another component of this is that if you're constantly chasing these pleasures and chasing these rewards, you are going to lose touch with the natural rewards of life. A walk in nature, a smile from your child or a friend, spending time with other human beings, going for a coffee, eating nutritious food, these natural rewards that the world gave us, we are going to lose contact with this. And this is a real core context of addiction as well. It's called the natural rewards theory, that we lose contact with these natural rewards because the amount of dopamine that's released through these other addictive behaviors and substances just outshines those natural rewards. So it's really important to see it from that perspective, that your brain is being hijacked by that. But something else as well that I think is really important, and this is probably for people that can't understand other people that are trapped by addictive tendencies. And they often think that it's the person themselves. Why don't they just stop drinking? Why don't they just stop using the drugs? And they try to fix the problem. But the reality is, when a person is responding and drinking alcohol, eating too much food, having these addictive tendencies, that's not really the person themselves. That is the identity and the ego. It's like the addiction takes on a life, an entity of its own. And that is who is actually acting in that context. And if you see someone and you're asking someone, maybe a loved one, to stop drinking, can you please stop drinking? You will find that they will get angry. That's the addiction actually protecting itself because it wants to stay alive in terms of an ego, an identity. It wants to stay alive. But most importantly, it wants to protect those more vulnerable parts of yourself that is using the drug in the instance to escape that initial pain that started the whole process at the very start. So it's important to recognize that with somebody, if you have a loved one in addiction, to recognize that it's not really them that's trying to defend their position and get aggressive sometimes in that arena. It's the addiction that is acting itself in that moment. But the one question that I get more than any other question is this: how can I help a loved one, whether it's a family or a friend or a work colleague? How can I help a loved one that's in addiction? Now, I used to have an answer for this, and I used to have a metaphor based on 3 seeds: the talking seed, the listening seed, and the action seed. And the talking seed was just telling them what to do, trying to fix the problem. That does not work. If you try to tell someone that they need to stop taking drugs or they need to stop drinking. You're taking away their shield of armor. Metaphorically speaking, it's like you're trying to pull their armor off, their coping mechanism off. It doesn't work, and they will get angry and they will defend their position. The addiction will defend its position. So that just doesn't work. Now, the other two elements of this metaphor, I'm going to lean into the expertise of two of my heroes, Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Anna Lemke, who I had the absolute pleasure of working with last season. We're going to have Gabor on next season, and we had Anna on this season. But when I was talking to Gabor throughout the documentary, the second seed, the listening seed, I says that's passive because you've got to wait for the person to come to you. And Gabor told me, oh, no, that's not passive. That's compassionate inquiry. And what you do is you hold that space for somebody, and you might have to ask them, look, if what's going on? Can we have a conversation and be there as that space that creates a safe environment for them to speak to you. And when they open up, you don't try to fix and tell them what to do. You listen with compassion. And you might throw in a question or two in terms of inquiring more in a compassionate way. And that gives them an opportunity to really speak about the challenges that they're facing. And you've got to never try to fix it. So they will come back to you with more questions, come back to you more in the future. They will feel seen. They will feel heard around that as well. Now, what I talked about with Professor Anna Lemke, who has decades of experience working with people in addiction in a clinical setting. And myself and Anna talked about this idea of creating consequences, or as we said, creating safe consequences. Because for many people in addiction, let's say somebody is having a blackout from drinking too much, you might try to help them to get back up to their bed. But then they wake up in bed and they think, oh, I mustn't have been that bad. So we've got to facilitate safe consequences. Leave them in the garden if they fall asleep. So they wake up, if it's safe, if they wake up, say, oh my God, I woke up in the garden. So they're seeing the reality of the addiction. Or if they're going to lose their job, don't cover for them. Don't pay their bills. Let them lose their job. Like, it could actually save their life. So if it's you and you're thinking about a loved one in addiction, think about that and say, right, how can I facilitate safe consequences, the opposite of enabling and being codependent, so that person can find a potential solution to the addiction that is really holding them back in life. But I want to finish up with the third seed of this metaphor that I talk about. So the first seed is tell them what to do, it doesn't work. The second seed is listen, but open that space and do it compassionately. The third seed is action. Be the person that they might want to become in the future. Because for my younger brother, James, I used to preach and tell him what to do. It didn't work. But James then went through his own challenges, and he seen me doing well in life. And when he found a moment where he was looking for help, he came to me. I compassionately held that space, but he came to me because he seen I was doing things well in life, in my own recovery, and I was modeling behavior that he wanted. So the action seed gives people permission to do what's right for you. And when that person in addiction who is really, really struggling is ready for help, because you can't push them into looking for that help. You've got to be patient and wait for that moment. You will be the model of a person that they will come to. The action seed is really powerful. Self-belief, limiting beliefs, and negative self-talk was something that came up across several episodes. And Georgie mentioned it as well. Like, you've got to do it first and believe it later. And that's something that I utilize in my own life. I have this mantra in my life: take a big bite and learn how to chew later. Because if you have negative self-talk telling you you're not good enough, you won't be able to cope with that. Don't be an imposter, back to that imposter syndrome thing. You're not going to take action. And it's this idea that there's a thin line between self-delusion and self-belief, or you've got to be naive enough to take action, and then the beliefs can actually follow. That I think is really, really critical. But this idea, this topic really came up with Max Kennedy in the podcast with Max. So Max, young professional golfer who has this unbelievable self-belief. Max says it out loud. He believes he is going to be the best golfer in the world. And Max is only 24. He's only on the start of his professional journey. He's only turned professional less than a year, and he believes he's going to be the best. And it's this idea that me and Max talked about. There's a thin line between self-belief and self-delusion, but it's the actions that are absolutely key. And I've since been doing a little bit of work with Max, and every time I talk to Max, yes, he has the belief, but talent has got to find you working. You've got to be taking the action. It's back to what Georgie said. And every time I meet Max, he's out on the practice course before the practice course opens. He's doing ice baths at 6 o'clock in the morning up to his friend's house because he doesn't even have his own ice bath. He's taking the actions that are going to make him become and fulfill that belief that he actually has, that he's going to be the best in the world. But I think a really important element with Max as well, during the podcast, we were talking about, I was going to bring Max into the neuroscience lab. We are going to look at his brain. So when he's out on the golf course and he's feeling stressed, he makes a mistake, he's feeling anxious, we were going to utilize a technique, and it's a breathing technique to bring his body, to bring his brain back into homeostasis, back into balance, to calm the whole system down. And we got Max into the lab. We looked at his brain in a normal brain state, and he has a very normal brain, like many of us. Activity there, anxiety there, overthinking there, not really optimal for elite performers in terms of taking the shot, because especially in golf, you need to have this idea of no mind. But we also put Max then into this other state, this stressful state, and we ramped up the electrical activity in his brain. We ramped up the stress and anxiety. But then we done this breathing technique, which Max utilizes on the golf course. And it's a very simple technique. It's 4 seconds in through the nose, 6 seconds out through the mouth. Do that a couple of times. You lower your heart rate. But what we found with Max was it lowered the activity in his brain. So this is what Max does now on the golf course. So he has control over his biology, over his brain, over his nervous system. He regulates the nervous system and brings it back to calm. But the big difference with Max is he takes the actions. He utilizes these techniques. So again, it's the action is driving the belief. And this is really, really critical. And there was something that I asked Max as well, like, why do you have this belief? And he tied into something that I fundamentally believe in. And he says, I look at the undeniable facts of what's gone on in the past. And this is what we've got to do. We've got to look at the facts, what has happened in the future. We've got to stress test the assumptions underpinning our beliefs. Is it actually true? So for some people, they might say, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm terrible, I'm brutal at this, I'm brutal at everything. Well, is that true? Tell me things you're actually good at. And all of a sudden they say, well, I'm good at that, I'm good at that. So it's not actually true. You can cope. You can change. You are good at many, many things. So we've got to look at the undeniable facts, as Max said it. We've got to stress test the assumptions underpinning the beliefs and challenge the truth of what our limiting beliefs and our negative self-talk is actually telling us to do. Because for some people, it's this inner critic in our ear telling you you're not good enough, you'll never amount to anything, you're not smart enough, you're not tall enough, you're not attractive enough. These beliefs can come in many, many forms, and it's usually a voice, a narrator that is in our ear judging us, being spiteful and hateful towards us. So again, we've got to have the awareness around that, catch ourselves in that moment and challenge the assumptions and the truth that can be driving these negative beliefs. Another thread throughout the podcasts was this idea of connection, but more importantly, creating space for connection, because we are all so busy. I chatted with Lynn Ruan and Laura Dellon about this, the busyness of the modern world. And there's no space for true connection. And this is a huge topic for me next year. Actually, personally and professionally, I'm going to be creating space so I can connect with myself more. I'm going to be spending time in nature. I'm going to be spending time with myself, sitting with my thoughts. But I also want to be spending much more time with my loved ones. And it's this idea, like, life is so busy, and something that I recognize that when I'm saying yes to something in terms of the business, I'm probably saying no to my family and friends or time with myself. So we've really got to be aware of what we're saying yes to, what we're saying no to, and does it align with where we want to go in life? And for me, really important next year is to be connected with other people that I love and other people that I care for. It is so, so important. And it's even a big factor in my professional life as well. Like, I've noticed that organically, all of a sudden, I'm delivering more talks on connection and creating space in the busyness of life. And this was the key topic of my conversation with Dermot Whelan. How can we create these spaces? And Dermot talked about these mini spaces, finding these mini spaces and letting them add up. And it could be just like sitting in your car, putting your hands on the steering wheel, taking a breath, waking up first thing in the morning and just sitting with yourself, checking in. How do I feel? Your first coffee of the morning, right? How am I? How do I feel? Taking a breath. And it really taps into this idea of spirituality as well. Like, I think we need to create moments in our lives. That's why I'm going to create space so I can go on hikes, so I can, when I look at trees, when I look at flowers, when I look at animals, I'm actually seeing the animals. Like, cliches are cliches for reasons. There's really deep truths underpinning them. And it's like, wake up and smell the roses, because most people are going along in life, they're seeing roses, but they're not really seeing the roses. It's like the idea of white man can't jump. Are you hearing Jimmy? Are you really hearing Jimmy? You're listening or you're hearing. It's about Jimi Hendrix. Like, are you really present? Are you really in yourself and seeing nature, hearing nature, being quiet in your own body? And I think it's absolutely crucial now more than ever that we create these moments, these spaces, and having time to connect with ourselves and others. And I think in the podcast with Brezzy as well, like, for some people can be overdriven. I find myself, I do. When we chatted with Laura on this, and Lynn actually, both of them talked about their ADHD diagnosis, and they do. But Brezzy was talking about this idea of the discipline of rest. Sometimes we've got to be disciplined about taking a rest, disciplined about doing nothing, disciplined about creating the space so we can truly connect with ourselves and others. I was actually chatting to my mom saying I'm taking a couple of weeks off. It's something that I really need after a couple of really busy years. And she says, God, you'd be bored. And I says, boredom is what I need. I haven't had the time to be bored, and my mind isn't going to like it. My mind is going to look for the phone. My mind is going to look for something to do, but I need to just sit on the grass, sit on the chair, and that's it. Just be. And again, it's a cliche, just be, but that's what we need more of today. And we need to carve out those spaces. We need to slow down just to find that space to be. And I think this is really, really important. And I want to finish with this topic, I suppose, with this spiritual angle. And there's sort of a couple of crutches that I always go to in terms of spirituality. And spirituality for me, it's nothing religious. It just means connection. It means energy. But it also means awareness. And this is just a cue that has always worked for me. It's like a sort of a Zen narrative on things, but like, you can be aware of something, like be aware of a picture hanging on the wall. But how about being aware of the space that allows that picture to be? And all of a sudden that opens up another dimension for me. Oh, going deeper. And it's like if you're even listening to your breath, breathe in, breathe out. But what about the space at the end of the breath? Or you hear sounds, you might be listening to me talking, but what about the space at the end of my voice right now? There's a space there. There's a space before I started talking again. So being aware of the spaces where things are in space, where you're hearing things in time, be aware of the space. And that just sort of brings me into another dimension to create that space, to slow down, to be more present in ourselves. Because again, the world is pulling us off course. The last topic I want to talk about in the solo episode is perhaps the most important topic. And it's this idea of gratitude and kindness, because they really are interlinked. And I want to give you a little bit of an insight into the neurobiology of gratitude and kindness, for that matter. When we experience gratitude in our lives, when we are thankful for something, a moment, and we experience that basically releases serotonin, that feel-good neurotransmitter, from an area of the brain called the raphe nucleus. And it sends neural pathways. It releases serotonin up around the cortex of our brain, flooding the brain with cortex. And like gratitude truly is a superpower. If you're feeling gratitude, you can't be jealous, you can't be resentful, you can't be angry. It's such a powerful state to be in. And this neurobiology really taps into that. But something around the neuroscience of gratitude that I learned over the last couple of years is this idea of being kind is really powerful as well. And I don't want to dislike people having a gratitude list. There's no damage in having a gratitude list. It might give you some benefits. But if you really want to get a big bang for your buck in terms of the amplification of serotonin at that neurobiological level, you've got to create a narrative around gratitude or experience gratitude. Like in the moment, you feel really grateful for something in your life. Now, I've sort of utilized this myself in terms of the visualization technique where I visualize for a minute every morning. This is a non-negotiable technique for me. Every morning for 1 minute, I think of a moment in my life where it was emotionally evocative. I felt so grateful. And it usually involves people. It's always loved ones in your life. You're not going to be grateful for an extra hour you stayed in work. It always comes back to connection with other people. So I think of moments in my life with my partner, with my stepdaughter, with my nephews, with my mum and dad going for the walk in the Phoenix Park where we were really connected, and I feel grateful for that time. And that releases the amount of serotonin far more superior than if you have a gratitude list. But what the research shows that if somebody is grateful to you, you release even more serotonin in terms of that gratitude. So what that does is it promotes kindness. So if you are a kind person and you are kind to people, you are going to be getting people thanking you, and you can't be going around being kind. Hopefully people are going to be grateful to you to get that bang of serotonin. It doesn't work like that. It's got to be honest. It's got to be real. But if you go and be kind to other people, and Brian McDermott is a great proponent of this. Like, if you're feeling like crap, go and help someone. That's service, the service to other people. But it taps into this idea of kindness. It taps into this idea of gratitude. And I want to finish that with a thank you to the amazing Kind Foundation who sponsored the podcast. And their mantra is kindness creates big ripples. Small acts of kindness can create huge ripples into the world. And it taps into gratitude, it taps into connection. And if we're thinking about the neurobiology of that, we're talking serotonin, we're talking about oxytocin, we're talking about removing metabolites like tachykinin and other challenging molecules within the brain that's related to social isolation, disconnection, and all of the other challenges in the world today. So to finish up, the message is be kind, experience gratitude, and be connected. Slow down and be connected with the people that you love. Before you go, I want to offer you free access to my online courses. All you will need to do is go to the details in the podcast, in the description, and have a look for online courses. Key in the code RESILIENCE. Once you get in there, and you get free access to my courses on self-talk, morning routines, breaking bad habits, unlocking the secrets of addiction recovery. It's all there, and it's all for free.